Tyler Cavalli here on this Friday morning. It is the first day of the Division I National Tournament for volleyball across the states. And today it is the Huskers at home who will be the number one seed in the whole land of the national tournament. They'll open up here against Long Island University. We'll have the game for you on KRVN, Cami Country at KRVN.com. And to help us break down the season, what's to come here, what we hope is a long tournament run, is voice of Husker Volleyball, John Baylor. Good morning, John. How are you doing here this week as you get to be at home here, at least in this opening round of the national tournament?
I'm doing great. I love being at home. The Vandy Center is a wonderful place to be when you're calling a volleyball match, when you're playing a volleyball match, when you're watching a volleyball match. And this year, do not have to travel. Second round. Last time we made it to a Final Four 2021, we had to go down to Austin, Texas. Not complaining. And it worked out just fine, but I prefer being here in front of 9,000 fans.
Yeah, and obviously that place will be rocking later on tonight. The match begins at 7 o'clock. Pregame is at 6 o'clock, by the way, tonight in Lincoln. Boy, John, what a season this has been for John Cook's squad. 28-1, won the Big Ten title. Only loss was to Wisconsin just this last week, a week ago actually now. And this team is rolling, and what a group that he's put together here. There's experience, but there's freshmen that, really haven't looked like freshmen. They've played well all year. The defense has played well. Offense hitting at a high clip overall. What a year for your 30th season calling Husker Volleyball.
Yeah, it's so special. They keep me young, and they inspire me, and they dazzle us. Just so many magic moments. I mean, that regular season win at the Devaney late October over Wisconsin to end the 10-match losing streak to Wisconsin is probably one of the great, if not the one, certainly one of the top 5 greatest regular season matches I've ever called. Just the 1 versus 2 undefeated teams, the largest television audience. We're fans of radio, but occasionally we just mention that television has big audiences, and especially for volleyball, increasingly so. There were 620,000 viewers that day for a match that followed a Husker football game, which had 560,000 viewers. So you had more folks watching Nebraska-Wisconsin volleyball than watched the Husker football game earlier that day. So it's just been an amazing run. Of course, the stadium match, an inspiration really for hopefully every young person in this state, especially girls, who by looking at those videos, looking at those pictures, realizes, you know what, we will applaud and respect and support whatever your passions are, and you just go for it. It's amazing how far you can reach and you can end up. But on August 30th, I really sent a message to everyone, certainly young people, what's possible in this state and what's possible in sports and what's possible no matter what your productive passion might be.
John, how about this freshman squad, the freshmen that have really played well this season? Obviously, many awards were handed out yesterday, and several of them were on the won awards. We saw freshmen win Big Ten overall awards. How are you surprised, I should say, of how good they have been coming in here to this season?
Before I saw them, I would have been surprised. But when I saw them in Central City back in the spring, I realized they had injected so much talent into this program, but also had a unique chemistry. I mean, Bergen Riley and Harper Murray were best friends upon arrival. They might have lived in different states, but somehow in their years playing for the U.S. Junior National program had forged this wonderful closeness. And you've got to have close relationships between setters and their hitters. But Bergen's really the one that's made the biggest difference because we struggled setting the volleyball. We had 3 different setters last year, and the attackers weren't always sure where the ball was going to end up. But with Bergen's arrival, you had a setter who had started for her varsity team since 8th grade, had been a 3-time South Dakota Gatorade State Player of the Year, and she could fling the ball everywhere and do it so deceptively that defenses really didn't know where the ball was going. And suddenly you had really happy attackers like Harper and Lindsey Krause before she got hurt. Now Allie Batenhorst, the 2 middles have had big, huge years. Andy Jackson hitting almost 500 for the season. And Merritt Beeson arguably should have been the conference player of the year. So, yeah, these youngsters just remarkable. And Lainey Choboy, if she'd gone almost anywhere else, would have been a starter from day one at libero. Right. And she sacrificed and adjusted and had to play part-time and, frankly, didn't even get to serve when Lindsey Krause got hot serving. So she really marginalized the role by choice that she would have her first 2 years in college when she chose Nebraska, and did so selflessly. So it's really something special to watch. Don't take it for granted. We're not, but for a team with no seniors to be this talented and this successful is very unique.
Yeah, and again, if you missed it, 7 members of the Nebraska volleyball team, as well as head coach John Cook, received Big Ten volleyball postseason honors that were announced yesterday. And, of course, John Cook winning Big Ten Coach of the Year. How does he just keep doing this? How does he keep retooling? And after last year and maybe the year before, or I don't want to call them down years, but I guess by his margin maybe, but how does he keep doing this? And now the number 1 seed in the national tournament.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, John Madden, the legendary Oakland Raiders coach, said, coach, you should move on after 10 years. After that amount of time, they stop listening to you. And college is a little different because you get new players every 4 years, but still, year 24 to be this successful doesn't happen all the time. And the real secret, in my opinion, was what he did after, the halfway point, 10, 11 years into it. He had some struggles. He's been public about those, and he reinvented himself and the program. And we've borne the fruit of that. I think since 2015, you really began the latest golden age of Nebraska volleyball, and Michaela Fecky and Kenzie Maloney, and that bunch came in, and Kelly Hunter was a third-year sophomore, and 4 consecutive Final Fours later, 2 national championships. You really had something. Well, you typically would expect a drop-off, and there was a mini drop-off thereafter. But, 2021, you're right back in the national championship match, and it just has been a special run. And now with this new group, which I think has a lot of similarities with their energy and talent level with 2015, you get the sense that there's no near-term end to this golden age of Nebraska volleyball. But yeah, Coach Cook reinvented himself. He did things like bring in a team psychologist. He brought in a team strength coach that travels with the team, warms up with the team every practice and game. And he really started listening to his players more than he had previously. And Kelly Hunter back in 2015 asked him to sit down during matches. And he never probably would have done that without that suggestion, nor possibly would have he have heard that suggestion. And he's been sitting at matches ever since, and that really calms his players. It's had quite a beneficial effect. So it's inspiring to me because, here's a guy who, when he was in his late 50s with all sorts of success and 2 national championships, decided he needed to rethink his approach, and he did. And the program and all of us are the beneficiaries. Well,
it is fascinating because I feel like that could go the other way. You see coaches that say, I'm doing it my way or the highway type of deal. And sometimes it works that way, it continues to work. And it seems like though often it doesn't necessarily. John Baylor, voice of Husker Volleyball, is joining us. First round of the national tournament starts tonight in Lincoln as the Huskers will take on Long Island University. Also in the national tournament in this first round little area, it's Missouri and Delaware. They'll play later today, right around 4 o'clock in Lincoln. Only loss this season for Nebraska was at Wisconsin. That was just a week ago. And I have to imagine that after the loss earlier this year for Wisconsin in Lincoln, they probably, we always say, oh yeah, people circle this, the rematch or, circle seeing the team again. It seemed like they had circled the rematch with Nebraska with the way that they played the other night.
Yeah, they were the strong favorite in that match, and they had a lot on the line. They needed to win to pretty much guarantee a top 4 seed, which is coveted because then you get to host the second weekend, which is such a big deal. And yeah, they had some revenge on their mind as well. But I'll tell you, Tyler, I think Wisconsin's the favorite to win the championship. They just go 6-7, 6-9, 6-4, 6-3, 6-2, 6-4. Whenever you're attacking against that front line, you've got to have that in mind that those huge hands are right in front of you. They got a great libero and Yulia Orzel. So, yeah, they had the huge crowd. I mean, that was a tough atmosphere. And Huskers got great news when Wisconsin became their own host of a regional, and on the other side of the bracket as well. If there's a third match between these two, it's going to have to be in the national championship game. Same with Stanford, same with Texas, same with Oregon. So Huskers caught a break with these seedings, in my opinion. You got a long way to go between now and then, but the stakes will be the national championship if we see Wisconsin again.
Yeah, I hate to agree with you in terms of Wisconsin probably being the favorite right now for the national tournament and maybe winning it all. it just seems like that's they're maybe just a sliver better at this point. But again, a lot to happen between now and the national championship game. If Nebraska is so lucky to get to that point, you brought up a good point that the run for Nebraska now on their side of the bracket, they could see a Kentucky in the next couple of rounds down the road as well, a Pittsburgh, a Louisville. Those teams will kind of knock each other off as well. But it does seem like, it seems like they should get through this first round. You never know what can happen, right? But that their side of the bracket is the most favorable side than the other side where Wisconsin and other teams are.
Well, I've heard Emily Amon with the Big Ten say she thinks the toughest path is Nebraska's path to the Final Four. So, regional people can differ, but you look at the number 2 seeds, and Kentucky's a fabulous team, a transformed team since the one we saw them. I mean, they mowed down the Southeastern Conference. Reagan Rutherford right now on the right side with a big left arm is tough to stop, almost unstoppable, frankly, and they've got a great setter, great libero. They have one of the best coaches in the country, and Craig Skinner, 5-year assistant coach for Nebraska from 2000 to 2004. But you look at the other number 2 seeds, Oregon, which beat Nebraska last year in the third round, and Texas and Louisville. I think, you probably choose Kentucky, as great and formidable as they happen to be. And then you'd see Pitt or Louisville in the next round. And last time we saw Louisville, they swept Nebraska at the Devaney Center in the early season a couple of years ago. So there's no easy path, but just given the history, you'd prefer to avoid Oregon and Texas, and they're definitely if you're fortunate to get to the Final Four, Wisconsin and Stanford until the final championship match. So in fact, a lot of things I think went Nebraska's way, but now you got to earn it, and you can't look ahead. And you could have a Florida in the third round, and Florida's missing 3 of their best pieces. They've had some injuries, but 2.5 months ago they were arguably the best team in the country. They beat Texas, they beat Stanford, they beat Minnesota. So then they got decimated by some injuries, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see. They're loaded. They've got a lot of talent. They got a great freshman who's like 6'8". So there's no easy path anymore. There used to be about 20 years ago, but now you want to get to the top step. You're going to face a lot of challenges well before the Final Four.
Bringing this thing full circle as we wind down the conversation here today. You're just thinking about this whole year for Nebraska volleyball, and not just necessarily the Huskers, but just volleyball in Nebraska as a general. This whole thing really started back in late summer in August with Volleyball Day in Nebraska. We all know how that turned out and how much of a success that was. Obviously set records, world records. It was so fun in all parts. All 4 of those teams playing in the national tournament at those levels. And, since then, volleyball in Nebraska, and we all know here in Nebraska, obviously, it is such a huge aspect in every part of people's lives. But what a fun year for just volleyball in Nebraska as a whole. It
is. It's something special. We should not take it for granted. It starts at the lowest level. Little girls dream of playing for the Huskers, and you've got a top 15 program perennially in Creighton, and now Omaha is a sleeping giant that's starting to awaken. It's something really unique that we should really appreciate, and it's tough to put into words. If you're not from here, you don't really get it. But once you saw those images from August 30th at the stadium, it drove it home that now there's this relationship between this sport and this state. And I grew up in Lincoln, Tyler, and volleyball did not exist. I mean, and the idea that something which was really embryonic, that in 1975 literally started at Mabel Lee Hall on the campus of the University of Nebraska, and now not quite 50 years later is something that we now consider synonymous with the state. Like John Cook has called us the volleyball state. I'm thinking, hold on, I thought we were the beef state, the Cornhusker state, the good life.
That's right.
Nebraska nice. The whole time it's and he's right. We're synonymous, the state of Nebraska, with this sport, and it's wonderful to see because it brings people together. I don't want to get too serious here, but I don't think a lot of young women get through adolescence unscathed. It's tough. It's tough to be a girl. I get to teach and see a lot of girls, and I have 2 daughters. It's tough, and team sports can really mitigate some of the challenges that young girls face growing up. Especially volleyball, they come together after every point. They celebrate athleticism. They get to express themselves physically, and it's a chemistry. It requires a chemistry to do well that is unique to sports. Certainly, it's something that doesn't particularly exist in individual sports. So, I've really realized that maybe it's a little bit of the secret sauce that makes this state special and makes our young women stronger than perhaps they'd otherwise be. And it's something to really celebrate and to be proud of.
Well, it all starts tonight again for Nebraska Volleyball, number 1 seed in the national tournament. They're at home to host Long Island University. And if they're so able to get past them, which they should be able to, they will play the winner of Missouri and Delaware, who will play first today at the Bob Devaney Sports Center in Lincoln. But it all begins tonight at what Nebraska hopes is a long journey in the national tournament, and what we hope to be as well, and hope to have future conversations with you, John, down the road here in the national tournament. But it all starts at 6 with pregame. 7 o'clock is First Serve on Cami and KRVN.com. And we look forward to hearing from you and what, again, hopes to be a long national tournament from you, John Baylor. I
hope so as well. Let's do this again. But, hey, tonight's the first. I've never called a match with a team called the Sharks. The Sharks and the Huskers stare at each other through a net tonight at the Devaney.
That is John Baylor, voice of Husker Volleyball, joining us here on KRVN.